JB here, JB here. Hope everyone's doing outstanding. November 14th, 2024, 3:38 here on this fine afternoon. Talk really quick about the market, some of the names I'm looking at, go from there. I think I'm on here. Yeah, I am. So really quick, first I'll talk about the S&P. Take a look at the SPY. Tight ranges the previous two sessions. That 595 spot was solid support. Looked like we bounced the last previous 2 days, and then that wasn't support today. You had Fed Chair Powell 3 o'clock. I tried to listen to some of it, pretty much reiterating some of the stuff he said last week, answering a lot of questions around independence of the Fed. He was asked twice last week if can he get fired, and it was an awkward moment. He said no, and it was awkward silence after. I'm sure if there is a way, they can find a way. But his term doesn't end. I think it's 2026, so he's got a year and a half left, but interesting stuff nonetheless. Also, I tweeted and posted in the chat room earlier that the VIX, which was was over 20 for pretty much most of late September, October, and then into the election, and then it seems like I call it like a flat tire. It just keeps going down regardless of what the market's been doing. So I guess that could be a good sign. So continues to be a silver lining. The small caps, once again, disappointing. So another over 1% down day for the IWM, 1.7%, 1.75 on Tuesday, 1% pretty much yesterday. So pretty much giving back almost all of its gap. And hopefully we don't head into towards that 225 handle. All right, now some individual names, and first I'll talk about Wynn. And watching Wynn, it's on the watch list every morning for me. So watching it spike up. I think Tim's in the chat room posted. I look, I said, "What is this candle?" I go look at the filings, and the owner of the Houston Rockets, he owns a lot of hospitality stuff. He's done casinos. He's a billionaire. He added to his stake, so I think he had a 6% stake was announced back in 2022. Wynn spiked, and then he just added up to 9.9%. So I think what happens when you're over a 10% owner of a public company casino, you have to go in front of regulators, and either they have to approve you, I guess you get a license or something to that effect, or they can get a waiver, and then you can get your stake higher. I don't know if he went up to 9.9% to avert having to do that. Someone responded to my tweet saying he's just looking to get passive income with a dividend, and it's like, how many publicly traded companies have a dividend right now? Why would you take a stock that you're pretty much very familiar with that sector, unless you're going to do some kind of activist situation, or you're going to look for a buyout. So the thing is, he's done some buyouts in the past, and the steak place, McCormick, I forget what it's called, something McCormick. It's like they did seafood and stuff. He did the same thing, and it was a smaller cap company, but he did some SC13. So he did ownership, and then eventually pushed to do the buyout. So this is kind of the same blueprint with Wynn, and I'm not saying that's going to happen, but outside of comments from himself or what have you, have to think maybe this is it's on the possible uh, outcome. So I went and got those 100 strikes for next week. They were inexpensive. Within 25 minutes, they were up over 200%. So I locked some in to cover some costs, and I'll hold those in to possibly into next week, pending any crazy update, right? So if he updates and say, hey, it's a passive investment, even that, he added another 3% to, 3% of the outstanding share count of Wynn. So it's not even like he just added 3% of, a couple shares. That's a huge amount of shares that he acquired. So, I mean, that's a big deal. So he's the biggest owner, and here he was outside of Wynn's wife. I forget what her name is, because Steve Wynn's not part of it anymore. But like Wynn here, also some good things. It's over its 50 and its 200-day moving average with its candle. And then you have the gap fill from that earnings, 95.56 or so, I think is the gap fill. So I could see it hitting that at least tomorrow. And then into the weekend, maybe you get some FOMO, you get some people talking about it, some speculation. And I think it deserves to move up into the hundreds regardless. I thought its earnings were pretty good. All right, so that's Wynn. So next is First Solar. I've been watching First Solar since, I always watch. It's a name I've watched over the years. But everything that's going on first with the election, and you saw the spike up in November all the way up to 220, a reversal from its earnings. So the big move was it had that dip at the end of October after its earnings and reversed it all, right? And so then you saw continuation, and then after the election, it was like it was a surprise, and folks were selling First Solar on the possibility, or they think that subsidies are gone for solar, right? I mean, so that was some. And then today you have rumors or reports that it's only going to be with the EV credit for $7,500, which I don't think that was any surprise, but it looks like it because then you see the solar names rallying. So Uh, to me, it's almost also too in a name like First Solar, everybody worries about the tariffs. Tariffs are great for First Solar, right? So if you followed solar for the last decade and more than that, you know that China used to flood the U.S. market with these cheap wafers, and it just it was not a good thing, and they had to, I guess they got the U.S. trade order, whatever it was involved, and that helped mitigate some of that, but it's still out there, and so I think there's a lot of things that are bullish for solar. You look at its earnings, I think it heads into the 200s into tomorrow possibly or next week and much higher. So I was actually looking to get some weeklies. Those were expensive on a risk reward basis. So with only one day to expiration, I went out, got next week's. I'll continue to hold those and I'll look for other opportunities to play for upside. But it's not even near its 200-day moving average yet. So that's at 206. It breaks that. Then the 50 days at 215. I mean, could it get there? It certainly can get there in the coming days. And you look at the premiums are insane. I mean, I wouldn't call it insane, but I'm trying to see here on uh, the the implied move right now is $6 on the weekly. So you divide that, and then it's $13 into next week. So was that 8%? So pretty decent implied moves for First Solar. All right, so that's that. First Solar. Okay, so NetEase. So I just added those NetEase calls just a little while ago. NetEase is another story I've followed over the years. I mean, it's the gaming giant in China, and some of the reason it's down here is more of a function of what's going on in China than its underlying fundamentals. I mean, company has $17 billion in cash. Just announced another 1.3 billion share buyback program to its 3 billion share authorization, and I mean, they reported decent results, and it was like a mixed bag. But you saw what happened. I think it was a couple of weeks ago when we had the big bazooka China stimulus news, and China markets went bonkers. The Hang Seng was up what 24%, the most since 1980, over a course of a 5-day span. And here it is. It went all the way up to 105, and pretty much like all the China ADRs succumbed to that pressure. It was down here at 77.50 before the earnings uh, this morning, well, overnight. I see it. It's one of those names that's had some large outsized moves before post earnings, and I think it's just getting kind of you know people are looking into it now as they see it's going to be on one of the bigger gainer lists for today, and I think it heads much higher tomorrow and into next week. So I was actually looking at weeklies, but then I'm like, oh, the strikes for next week look more interesting. Get an extra week of time, and if it gets into the 90s, those are going to play. It's going to be a couple 100% at least. If it gets to 90 tomorrow, that'd be phenomenal. But I'll look to close some out to cover costs when I get a chance to ride the rest, but really like NetEase into next week. Also, similar to First Solar, I mean, it just barely crossed this 50-day at $83, which is trading at 84.50 right now, 84.46, and then the 200 days at 92.41. So I mean, could see this thing overshoot. So that's NetEase. And you look long term, I mean, it's been companies. I mean, Apple's a bad example because I mean, it's not a bad example, but everybody likes to compare stocks to Apple. But some of the reason Apple's had these huge gains over the last couple of years is because of the tremendous stock buybacks, right? They could have just been par for the course in regards to earnings, and then just the share buybacks themselves, just a function of the share buybacks would cause their earnings growth to be 15-20% or whatever. So you take a look at NetEase with those huge stock buybacks, and you look at the long-term chart all the way back. I mean, 5 years ago, it's like pretty much a pancake. So at some point, it's going to break out. But rants for other days there. Gold, which took a little dip after Fed Chair Powell started to speak. At some point, I'll do my little piece, my 10-year anniversary update on my gold piece. It's funny, again, I put on the watch list. You read what I said about Bitcoin back in 2014, pretty much saying that the advent or the possibility that Bitcoin might become more, more popular, more folks become more aware of it as an asset and a possible store of value. It all it can do is not be a net negative for gold, and I still think that hasn't been priced in. And considering where gold has ran the last 10 years, especially its 30% run this year, I think there's opportunity for downside. But again, I have bear goggles when I talk about gold. So when I talk about uh, I obviously I think downside, but I look at the chart and you see that the upward trend since March has been broken. I think it goes down to $2,400 before the year's out. I'll continue to look for opportunities to play gold for downside. I locked some more of my December strikes in for 100% at this morning. Still holding the January's. I might go even further out. And then if there is weakness next week, and the thing is, gold's down like 4% this week, which is considering gold, that's a large move for gold. Gold typically only moves 1% or 2% over given even a week is 2% is a lot. So with that being said, you're always going to have these buy the dip folks in or machines or algos in there to say, oh, when gold drops 3% or whatever, they're going to buy, regardless of what else is going on, because just gold's an asset. So over the course of history, it's gone up. That's what it does. But I think there's opportunity there. So I'm not going to do too much more of a rant on there. Lemonade, disappointing. You had that insider buy this morning. Stock was all the way up to 34 and change. Looked like it was going to do that repeat of the squeeze, consolidation, squeeze, consolidation, squeeze. And then now we're in consolidation mode. I would have loved to see a resumption of the squeeze today. It looks like it's not going to happen. We're pretty much flat here. Still have my December strikes. Those are up still very nice to the upside. I already locked some of those in. I locked all the Novembers. Once it breaks 35 and holds, I'll look for more strikes. If that 31 fails tomorrow, I'll probably lock the rest of the Decembers in and just revisit. It's just volatile. And you saw what happened last week with that downgrade. I don't want to be in a spot where I see profits disappear because someone else wakes up who's been wrong on a stock to begin with and decides he wants to lower the price target or whatever. Well, actually, lower the rating. The analyst last week raised the price target. So that's Lemonade. Spotify, not much here to add about Spotify. I mean, it's talk like a broken record. Oh, and SPY's breaking 593 here. Uh, I was looking for some possible. I was talking about it the day of earnings. I think someone asked JWAG, someone asked me about it, and I said it probably goes to 500, but the premiums are insane, so not worth the risk reward. Then it does gap the next day, but the premiums were still expensive, so I passed. And then you could see, today it was 585. What did it go? Did it went 485? I didn't even pull it up the last quote here. It's down to 476. But just a great story. And back when it was $200, everybody hated it because it was not everybody hated it, but the bear case with no profits. And now it's a cash cow. It's going to be even a bigger cash cow as the years go on. So great growth story. I'm trying to think of some other names. I think that's about it. Altimmune, right? So watching it on post earnings on Tuesday, sat on my hands. Then there was follow through Wednesday. Couldn't sit on my hands anymore, and I got those December strikes. Not going to do anything about them. I'm not someone who typically I don't look to average down on options. That's just not what I do. If I do want to, I guess quote unquote average down, I usually either get lower strikes or I go further out. That's just how I've done it, and that's what's worked for me. So I'll be patient. It was above the upper Bollinger Band when it broke out on Tuesday and held that above Wednesday, and then it's back below that upper Bollinger Band, which is 9. So maybe some consolidation today and tomorrow, and then it can resume its upside. But again, I think it's a great story after its update. I mean, it's got to be $500 million market cap now. It was $600 million this morning, $140 million in cash. Further along in their studies and turn. And then some of it's promising, right? And then it has a 32% short interest to boot, which I mean, that creates opportunity in my opinion, especially if the person who's short they're wrong, right? And then they're wrong, then you're right double because you're gonna get buyers and you can get the short covers. So that's it, folks. Let's have a great afternoon. I'll be back on audio later. Rock and roll.